Hello, friends. I, Ankita Datta, project lead for the Mask Stories at www.tellmeyourstory.biz, welcome you to the second episode of The Mask Factor. I'm privileged to have with us author Shayamal Vallabhjee this evening, and we are story calls for submissions of short stories and poems on Mask. Also, registrations are open for the Writing Program Season 2 with the story prompt of Women's Silence, which is yet another form of Mask. Let me begin by introducing Shamal. Shamal Vallabhjee is a South African sports scientist and performance coach with 18 years experience in high performance sporting environments. He has authored 4 books on sports, science, and motivation, is a TEDx speaker, and a recipient of the ING and Australia India Youth Dialogue Fellowship, as well as Men's Health Trainer of the Year 2014. He is also a Global Fitness Advisory Board member to Herbalife and organizing committee member to the United Nations Changemakers Conference. Welcome, Shamal.
Thank you very much, Ankita, for welcoming me onto the show. Thank you.
So, Shamal, how are you doing during this new normal era? I mean, is it easy to cope up?
Yes, it's been an interesting experience. You know, the new normal has it changes, isn't it? It ebbs and flows, and for me, it's been a beautiful experience because I've always been someone who likes to surrender to an experience. I've always been someone who tries to live less from the head and more from the heart. And so now I try to feel my way through the new normal, which is what I also coach athletes and executives to do. So it's been a beautiful experience for me.
That's great. So this second question of mine, this would indeed be a common question to everyone, who would be a part of the Mask Factor. Simple yet intriguing. What is a mask? Your take on it as a human, as a sports person, as an author, everything.
So, mask is an interesting question. A mask fundamentally, literally, is something that you're putting on top, isn't it? So, metaphorically, it's a facade that you put on. And one of the words that we could really use for mask is I call it virtue signaling. Right. So physically, we don't walk around with things on our face, but what we do is we walk around with projections of how we want to be seen. Okay. And that's called virtue signaling, which means that you behave in a certain way, you tell a certain story, you use certain words, you dress a certain way, which projects a type of virtue that you would like to embody or you would like someone to be seen as. So we all fundamentally wear these masks, and these masks in terms of psychology are driven by one's need for power, status, and sex. These are the 3 fundamental psychological drivers behind any mask. Anything ultimately, when you come down, when you strip away self-transcendence, when a person's core fundamental need for survival kicks in more than the surplus of what they have, that need will be driven either by power, by money, or by sex. Okay, so the fundamental masks that we show up in the world with are masks that are either hiding your need for that or projecting your need for that in some shape and form.
Thank you, sir. So moving on, you pen down positivity, throughout your books, and you must be following those principles in your life as well. So, how did you start believing, in your ability to transform human mind and body, and without compromising on confidentiality? If you could tell us an inspiring story of recuperating someone from any probable existential crisis, we would be grateful for that.
Yeah, so existential crisis is really situational, isn't it? It depends on a person, and everybody's crisis at any one time seems existential to them at that fundamental moment in time. And that's the beauty of mindfulness or meditation, is that you're able to switch off the urgency or the intensity of what you're perceiving at that time. And for me, I've been quite fortunate that I grew up in a very spiritual family. I grew up in a very pious family. I understood the importance of service. I understood the importance of meditation, understanding scriptural knowledge. These were part and parcel of who I am. So the art and science of detachment is something, it's a word that I've been hearing from the time before I could even start walking. They talk about that. I've understood the philosophies of ego, of understanding the mind, of understanding surrender. Using I also lived in an ashram for almost 3.5 years, and we call everyone who has an initiated name, they end with das or dasa, which is servant of the Lord, which is an expression of humility. Okay, so I think fundamentally it's not a positive outlook for me. It's my outlook on service. It's that I try to show up in service to everyone else. And when you serving someone else, the attitude with which you serve someone is important. Imagine your cook coming and being grumpy in front of you, you won't want to eat it. Imagine your servant being grumpy with you, you wouldn't want them to be there. So the tone and mode of servitude is one of calm, is one of positivity, is one of light, is one of humility. So it's not that my positive outlook is the main driving force for me. It's my ability to always see myself in the mode of service that drives every other motion in me. With respect to how I help athletes, I help everybody understand the impermanence of any situation they go into. I teach them that if you truly want to see through this, we have to first appreciate the fact that this is not a temporary situation. And then using meditation and mindfulness, I help my athletes and my executives detach from that situation. In Buddhism, we talk about quite often saying that you can only truly appreciate the mountain from a distance. If you're standing on the mountain, you can't appreciate how beautiful it is. You can't appreciate the beauty of a flowing river if you're standing in the river. You can't appreciate the beauty of an ocean if you're standing in the ocean. You can appreciate other qualities of it, but not its beauty. So similarly, you can't appreciate a situation if you are engulfed by the emotions of that situation. So to understand and embrace impermanence, you have to first embrace the ability to detach from a situation. And that's the only way you grow. And that's fundamentally what I teach people. I teach people how to remain calm in a high pressure situation and how to detach from the emotions of that situation so that we can look at the masks, as in your language, that we're using, or the perspectives through which we are bringing to the table.
Thank you, sir. That was insightful, really. So you've been through the apartheid era, as I've read about you, through those tough times. So that I would interpret as a mask, donned by the whites, an ugly mask of a narrow racist mindset. So to you, I would like to ask, have similar masks been embraced by the blacks and the colored races too, like at some point of time or even if temporarily?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a mask. I wouldn't even say anyone was harsh in wearing that. Uh, you know, in every single situation out there, I've said this quite often and quite publicly, that when I experienced racism in the late 80s and the early 90s, the people who were indoctrinated into that racist society, in terms of the whites, for example, who were living a certain rule and treating people in a certain way, were as much victims of the apartheid as I was. They were not given a choice in how to believe and what to think. They were the byproduct of a belief system that didn't belong to them, which means their great grandparents and their grandparents did something and they grew up in that ecosystem. And so they just continued with that. So, yes, I was the victim on the surface, being a person of color, but they were also, if you peel away a few layers, they were also victims of a belief system that didn't belong to them. And fundamentally, every single one of us is a victim of a belief system that doesn't belong to us. Today, we call it childhood trauma. When you look at the schemas that an individual imbibes in their life after the first 10 years, that sabotages every single aspect of their life, they're also a victim. You understand? Now, we could blame a white person in the apartheid, but we could also blame our parents, and we can also say we can blame people in our society, or we can blame government, or we can blame rules. So you have to be very careful with how we choose to word a particular situation and how we choose to uh, firstly tell that narrative to ourselves, because the narrative you tell yourself is what lays the foundation for how you grow and learn from that situation. So the apartheid was a difficult situation, and like I said, there have been very many situations where people are conscious of what they're doing and they continue to do it, but deep below that they also don't know any better and they need to be educated. Similarly, you can't uh, you can't fault a person who was oppressed against from behaving in a certain manner because they don't know anything else. you know when they were suddenly given freedom and they suddenly had to fight for freedom and stuff like that, they were making every attempt to level the playing field. Fundamentally, it comes down to how do you want to show up in the world, not as a society, not as a collective consciousness, but as an individual. You got to ask yourself, how do I want to show up in the society, right? And when you stay with that question long enough, you'll get an answer, and then you've got to make in the behavioral changes that make sure you show up in that manner there. Because fundamentally, the collective consciousness of a society will always be lower than the individual intelligence or consciousness of a person. The individual consciousness of a person can always rise faster than the collective consciousness of a society. So if you're embracing the trends in psychology or mindset that everyone else is, you are fundamentally operating at a lower state than everybody else. Because why? You've embraced the consciousness of a collective group, which will average out way lower than where you are. Of course, it will raise certain people up. That's the law of averages. So, you know, I look at, it's taken me a long time to look at apartheid and every other situation through different lenses, through various situations. For example, I'm eternally grateful to the apartheid for embracing in me a certain work ethic. It taught me to work 10 times harder, you know, because people of color had to work 10 times harder. Now, that's a fundamental benefit of it. And I think when someone looks at something and you acknowledge that it's played such a vital part in who you are, if I acknowledge that my work ethic is a contributing factor for my success, okay, then how can I hate the situation that taught me to have that work ethic? So we must be, in wearing our masks, in removing our masks, in looking at any situation, it's very important to take a mature stance, to not pick and choose your battles as per convenience. It's very important to be diplomatic. It's very important to be democratic and to be rational in it. But more importantly, to be mindful of the words you choose, how you choose it, and how you choose to phrase it. Because we could be one of two things. You could be a person whose voice stands out, okay, which means that individual collective consciousness, that individual consciousness has the power to resonate far and wide. Or if you're not careful with it, then you will resonate the collective consciousness of an entire group because of your need to fit in. And that's where it becomes dangerous.
Sure, sir. Sure. Thank you. Development. I am curious about the significance of the chronology of these three words: breathe, believe, and balance. If you could elaborate and enlighten us with some, behind the scenes thought process. Like, why did you order them in that way?
you know I mean, the title, quite honestly, for any writer who's there, you would know that uh, I write a book. I'm not attached to the book. After it's edited, I hand it over to my publisher. They come up to me with titles. I give a few suggestions, but fundamentally, there's an art and a science to cover design and titles, which I surrender often to my publishers. This particular title stood out from the options that we went because all three of these things are fundamentally important and fundamentally in the book. Your breath is the gateway between your subconscious mind and tapping into your super consciousness. It's also the secret to stilling the mind. So getting rid of your anxiety, your stress, your fear, all of that's there. The word belief is very important because fundamentally I believe everything starts with self-belief. You believe in yourself, and then you need to convince one person. Everyone needs at least one person who believes in themselves. And your belief and your conviction in your ability, your belief and your conviction that that one person instills in you is fundamentally what gets the ball rolling, or what gets the stone rolling, or moving, or creating momentum in front there. And then the whole book is really and truly about balance. And balance is probably one of the most misunderstood words in the English dictionary. It's probably one of the most common words, but probably one of the most misunderstood words. People don't seem to understand the components that go into making balance. They don't seem to understand what balance really means, and how to navigate it, how to find it. And there are many, many factors that go into it. In the book, I name numerous conditions that need to be present for you to find balance. I also bring the breath back in, teaching people how your awareness is critically important to find balance in there. So these three words in the title are there fundamentally because they form the three legs of a stool upon which self-realization, or the science of self-realization, is built. It's built on awareness, it's built on belief, and it's built on fundamentally navigating the multiple variables or components in your life to find balance. If you can do that, then you give yourself the best position to have both spiritual and physical success.
Thank you, sir. So we were already talking about balance. So while going through the description of breathe, belief, balance, I stumbled upon a very interesting fact. It said that your popularization of the concept of balance in India, that you have popularized the concept. So what exactly is this balance according to you? I mean, is it related to the genre of sports or life or spirituality, or is it a whole that enclasps these all?
So when I talk about balance, I think the reason why that particular phrase is there is because I've been talking about balance for almost a decade right now. I've been using that word, referring to it, because it's a fundamentally important thing. And balance for me is broken up into four verticals: the body, mind, relationships, and your environment. And I talk about navigating the balance between these four verticals. Body is your training and your nutrition. Your mind is the quality of your thoughts, your mental health. The relationship is the quality of your relationships with people. And fundamentally, your environment is everything, is all the media you consume through the five senses that molds your neurobiology and your psychology. And balance is your ability to navigate these four pillars, or understand how to flow and ebb between these four pillars. So I don't refer to it with respect to a career, with respect to a sport, whoever. I refer to the art of balance to an individual, because each individual will have multiple factors under each one of these four pillars that they'll have to navigate, which I generally teach people to do and identify in the book. So when I'm talking about balance, I'm talking about understanding and embracing a few truths. The first truth is that balance is not symmetrical. Balance is an asymmetrical science. Okay. And I learned this from nature, from astrology, from cosmology, from biology, from neurobiology. You see, balance is not symmetrical, it's asymmetrical. The second myth is balance is not static, it's fluid and dynamic. Balance changes every single second. And your ability to navigate these ever changing variables is directly proportional to the third thing, which is the importance of the central point or the fulcrum in your life. Okay. And the fulcrum is you, is how well do you know yourself? So I often ask people the question, and if you want to know how well you know yourself, try to write a page about you without using your name or your surname, without mentioning about money or any job titles or who your family is or where you live or what you do. Try to describe yourself independent of all of these things that the world puts on top of you or you think's important, right? And if you can write a page on yourself, then you've really started moving the ball forward to truly understanding yourself. Okay. If you can't do that, then that's where the work needs to begin.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So breadth belief balance that amalgamates science, literature, and environment. So a human life is sprouted into its full glory when these three elements are juxtaposed in perfect measures. So is breathe, believe, balance an embodiment of such a human soul, like a book that itself reads as the book of life?
I'm sorry, I lost the last part that you're saying. Sorry.
Is your book an embodiment of a human soul, that a book that reads itself as the book of life?
I wouldn't call it the book of life or anything as such. It's just a very basic guide to helping a person on their journey. I wouldn't claim it to be anything else except my journey and my realization and my growth process. It's an embodiment of the tools and techniques that I've used to navigate the challenges in my life, the tools and techniques I've used to help my athletes overcome some of their things. I am not qualified to write a book that becomes the book of life. I'm not qualified to be the teacher and the guru for everyone, guiding them on how to go and what to do. All I can do is humbly serve by sharing my experiences, and hopefully, if someone recognizes the same pain in their experiences, they're welcome to try what I've recommended or try to experiment with it. But I would never go claiming that this is the solution for everyone or that this is an almanac for anything, to be honest.
Okay, sir, sure. But each chapter of your book, that opens a new dimension, probably a new domain of human portrayal, suffering, and freedom. They lock hands in your book. So, do you have faith that a guide to lead at least a better life can, purposefully be fruitful? Because if a self dilemma, an event is predestined, so can I fight and stand against the destiny? Because I've read about transcendence or how to lead a better life or something like that.
You totally can. And your ability to move against destiny is not my literature, it's the literature that's coming from scriptures. So if you look at Bhagavad Gita, even, or Mahabharata, it's written where Krishna explains that the four things common between man and animals is our desire to sleep, our desire to eat, our desire to have enjoyment or pleasure, and our desire to defend itself. These are the four common things that are common between man and animals. But he also explains that the four things that differentiate a human being from an animal, and that is your ability to rationalize a situation. The second is your ability to experience bliss. Bliss is higher than happiness. The third is the ability to make choices in life. And the fourth is the determination with which you execute the first three, which is rational thinking, bliss, and your ability to make choices. That's the differentiator between us. So every single person always has a choice within them, because that's the greatest gift you are always given. You're given a choice in a situation. I always tell this very, very beautiful story of uh, a man had this really, really beautiful uh, dog, and he was taking this dog and walking down the street with this dog. Okay, and another man was approaching him, and he stops, and he says, "Oh my God, why are you taking this donkey for a walk?" Okay. And the man got very, very upset and got very angry. And he says, "What are you saying, taking a donkey for the walk?" He says, "This is a thoroughbred dog. Can't you see how beautiful he is?" And the man says, "I wasn't talking to you. I was talking to the dog." you know so and that's a beautiful story. It's a really funny story, but what it is it highlights that, you see, a dog doesn't have the ability to choose whether to be upset or not, or choose how to receive this information. A man has a choice, and when that is said, he could make a choice whether I want to be upset or whether I want to brush it around. That's probably one of the most powerful gifts that we're given, which you can exercise at any one time to decide how you want to, which path you want to cross when you get to the fork in the road.
Thank you, sir. So, last but not the least, I would conclude today's session by asking you that being a black during apartheid, being a Jew under Nazism, and being a human in this pandemic. So, would you depict them being similar? I mean, what is your ultimate takeaway from a period like this?
I would never depict all of these as similar. For the reason why not depicting it as similar is I don't want to cast a generalization over anyone's pain. I can never claim to understand. Yes, I experienced apartheid, but I never experienced it like how blacks experienced it 20 years before me and the atrocities they had to go through. I know family members of mine who were involved in the freedom struggle, that I know what their life was like. I can never claim to understand the pain and suffering, or emotionally and physically, of people who had gone through the Holocaust, for example. All I could do is speak from a single perspective. I can talk from the perspective of the pandemic, saying, as a fellow human experiencing this, I empathize and sympathize with the pain and the loss that we're currently experiencing. But I would never go down the line of trying to superimpose any particular emotion over anyone else's pain, judging it as similar or less or more. And I would encourage anyone else to do the same.
Thank you, sir. It was just perfect. I mean, we have been discussing whole new perspectives here. So, thanks a lot, Shamal, and thank you for this very insightful conversation and also for your time this evening. To
Thank you.
everyone, let me put a reminder. Tell Me Your Story calls for submissions on Mask, and registrations are open for the writing program season 2 as well, with the story prompt of Women's Silence, which is yet another form of mask. We hope to hear from you, and till then, let us all try to stay well, stay safe, and though distanced, let us stay together. Good night.